getting right into this thing, how would you describe what it is that you do?
Good question. So I'm a spiritual teacher, and I help people to realize the truth of the nature, and I help people on the spiritual path. I support them when they need support, and I move them deeper when they're ready. I bring them both uh, pain and reassurance, and I basically hold their hand on their way to happiness, peace, and equanimity until they no longer need my hand.
Oh,
And then
beautiful.
they leave me, hopefully.
That's awesome. So yeah, just providing guidance to true freedom, right?
Yes, yes, yes. Providing guidance to freedom. Yes.
Mm. So how would you describe what true freedom is? That's a big one.
um, well, the first answer that comes to my mind is very simple. Freedom is freedom. You either have it or you don't. You're
Mm,
either free or you aren't. Like if you have to wonder if you're free, if you have any doubts about whether you're free, if you have to wonder about the degrees of your freedom, then you're obviously not free or your freedom is incomplete.
I see.
So, practically speaking, freedom, well, we can talk about freedom as freedom from suffering. That's one way to talk about it, right?
Hmm.
So for as long as you still suffer, there's more freedom to experience. There's more joy to find. There's more happiness to find. There's more equanimity to experience. Uh, but in practical terms, the freedom is in action. So freedom is also very deep self-possession, meaning that you are completely conscious and in full control of your behavior. And what prevents us from that is actually the resistance, fear, and trepidation of the inner experience that we don't want to have.
Mm.
So those resistances to the difficult internal experience, and it can be fear, humiliation, the loss of the pain of loss, like many things. We can discuss them at length, but in avoiding what we consider to be, what we perceive to be difficult and unpleasant experience, and in yearning for all the time what we perceive to be happy or pleasant experience, we become slaves to this dynamic.
Yeah.
And
That's Buddhism 101 right there.
yes, pretty much. Yes. So when they talk about clinging and avoidance in Buddhism, that's exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Mm.
Yes. There's only one path described in many different words by many different traditions. So all arguments between them are very silly.
Mm. So I think you already touched upon it, but how would you describe what suffering is? I guess taking the other side of the coin. What is suffering in your understanding of it?
Well, again, yeah, we can talk about suffering in many different ways. We can talk about suffering. Some people talk about suffering as identification. Some people talk about suffering as judgment. Some people, you can talk about suffering in many ways, but most fundamentally, suffering is resistance to experience.
Uh-huh. I
So
see.
suffering is the belief or a view. We could put it this way, that the experience that you're having is something that you shouldn't be having,
Yeah.
that you would rather have something else, that you would rather experience something else. And it's connected to this idea of spirituality of being right here, right now, because so
Mm-hmm.
right here, right now is the only experience accessible to you. So when you're not here or now, whether you're in the past or in the future, you're basically wanting to be somewhere else,
Yeah.
right? So if you in the past and it's a traumatic past and you're reliving your past difficulties, your past defenses, your past traumas, if it's a good past, then you're nostalgizing. Then in the future, right? If you're thinking about the bad future, then you're experiencing fear and anxiety also right now. But you are there. You're in the future, but the experience of fear and anxiety is right now,
Yeah.
and you don't like it, of course. Or if you're hopeful about the future and very ecstatic about the future, then you're also fantasizing about how good it will be. Not now, right? You're going somewhere else. So this sort of rejection of the present experience in favor of something else, be it in the past, in the future, or some fantasy realms, or anything at all, is what constitutes dreaming. And that's what constitutes suffering. So we pick and choose. We always want some experience that is not the one that we're having. And if we're having a difficult experience, then we want to escape it. We want to avoid it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's suffering. So suffering and bondage, suffering and being enslaved, suffering and unconscious programming, suffering and those kind of automatic unconscious behaviors, suffering and lack of freedom are very, very deeply connected in this way.
Yeah.
Does this make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Be here now.
Yeah. Yes.
The teaching is so simple, but it seems
yes.
like...
I mean, it's extraordinarily simple. It's just, the path is very simple. It's just not easy.
Yeah. It's peculiar in that way.
Yes.
Because really, when it comes down to it, I guess if you want to explain it in a simplified manner, we've all heard this before, obviously, it's be in the moment, right? Be here in the moment. That's really what it comes down to. But it seems
precisely.
like
but yes,
we do
but
it
sometimes
to ourselves.
the difficulty is, I apologize. I didn't mean to.
Right.
but the difficulty is that sometimes what you experience in the moment is not pleasant at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. It like you begin to meditate, you meditate for a few hours, and there's boredom, or there's fear, or there's anxiety, or there's anger, or there's something else, you know? So the habitual conditioned response of the mind is, no, this is not what I want. I want to distract myself now with something else. I want to create some other experience for myself. And some meditators actually, in their meditating practice, even encourage this sort of creation of experience. So whenever something uncomfortable comes up, they say, oh, imagine or give it compassion or something like this. What you really need to do is to give it attention, is to give it awareness. And attention and awareness is the strongest, deepest form of compassion. So a very a very common mistake in meditation is yearning for a specific experience or trying to avoid any difficult experience in meditation. And it's the same mistake that people make in life.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it seems to be. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going to finish up now. So the teaching is very simple. But the path is not easy to follow because it involves accepting the whole variety, the whole universe of your experiences. And some of them can be excruciatingly painful. But some of them would be not excruciatingly, but overwhelmingly beautiful.
Yeah.
And extraordinarily beautiful because there's a deep symmetry of all experiences in the mind. It's like if you can be in the deepest pit of despair, then you can also be at the highest peak of ecstasy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And all of those experiences are explored in the spiritual path, accepted, lived through, on the way to liberation.
Mm. Yeah. So would you say the path to liberation is finding the equanimity between the two poles of experience that you described, the symmetry between the two? It's to find somewhere in the middle, the middle way.
Yes and no, because yes, because equanimity and acceptance of all experience is your true nature.
Mm-hmm.
From this perspective, yes. No, because it's not something that you can find. Because like for as long, if you think that you found it, like for example, if you think that you learn to balance it, then there's some effort involved in it.
I see.
And the true equanimity and peace are completely effortless. So it's not like trying to find it or balance it, or all of those are still attempts to control it. It's basically opening up to more and more of it, opening up to any experience at all, and actually experiencing it, which is the difficult part of the path. But the other side of this coin is bliss. The other side of this coin is happiness. The other side of this coin is joy. So basically, loosening resistance and expectations from experience.
I see.
And then with time, what happens is as you lose resistance and expectation of experience, you start seeing for yourself. It's not like something you find; it finds yourself. You start seeing for yourself that they're all that you can take them all, that none of them lasts forever, that none of them kills you, that you're absolutely capable to go through the most difficult fear as well as the most blissful, ecstatic experience, which can be so amazing that it's almost painful in its unfamiliarity. And slowly the mind learns to stop differentiating and being open to everything.
Yeah. Well said. Oh, that was great.
Thank you.
Wow. We're only 15 minutes in. I feel like we've covered a lot of bases. This is great.
Right.
Oh, man. Oh, man. I don't even know where to go from here. It seems like
take your time. Take your time.
It seems like from what you described is something that is where, how do I put this? It's like the difference between pain and suffering, you know?
Yes.
It's like when you truly do have no outcome orientation, pain is different. I don't know how to explain.
Yes. No. I understand precisely what you're saying. Yes, physical pain is unavoidable. Pain is different. Suffering is not pain. Suffering, strictly speaking, is a very peculiar thing. Suffering comes up in the total absence of pain. Like, for example, what happens in meditation? Like, you take a beginner meditator or even an intermediate meditator, and they meditate, let's say, for 2 or 3 hours. They're not gonna like it, right? So what's happening? Your body's completely safe. You're fed. You're warm. You're comfortable. You're not doing anything, and yet it can be fearful, boring, exhausting, difficult. So what is that? That's suffering, right? So suffering is basically difficult experience. You can also call it pain, but it's not a physical pain. Sometimes it manifests as physical pain, but it's temporary. But you can call it like emotional, energetic pain. The pain, some sort of pain of internal experience that has nothing to do with the physical circumstances of your situation. And that's why it all comes from the past. So all suffering is coming from the past. It's not. It's coming from our conditioning. It's coming from the abuses. It's coming from the mistreatment. It's coming from the sickness of our society. It's coming from how we were treated before, and all of the beliefs that we accumulated, and all the suppression, the emotional suppression that we have been doing to ourselves. So suffering is basically, you can define suffering as discomfort, which can rise to tremendous levels in the total absence of objective difficulty. So that's suffering.
Wow, that's good, man. And it all comes down to attachment.
Yes, in a way, yes. To attachment to feeling a certain way, which also can be described as attachment to life circumstance, to other people, to things we owe, to a relationship, but fundamentally, all of those attachments are attachments to feeling a certain way.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, you're going to lose it all. We all die.
Yeah.
So, but the fear of losing it is the fear of feeling bad, and actually, even the fear of death. I mean, the interesting thing about death is that you cannot experience death.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if you define death, it depends on how you define death, right? So if you define death as the lack of experience, that isn't something that you can experience. So it's absurd to be afraid of it, right?
Yeah.
If you're afraid of death, then a logical question is, well, why aren't you afraid of the eternity? Well, like if you're afraid of the eternity of death, right? Then I could ask you, why aren't you afraid of the eternity that happened before you were born?
Huh.
And why don't you remember it? And if you think something is really wrong with the eternity of death, then how come you're totally fine with your passive eternity before you were born? So what we're really afraid is we're afraid of ego death. We're afraid of the experience of ego death, and that feels like death oftentimes, but it's still an experience. Well, fortunately, that's the only death that you can ever experience.
Mm.
So the only death that you can experience and all of the fear with it is the death of enlightenment, the death of seeing yourself in its totality, in your totality. The death of being much more conscious than you were before.
Mm. Mm.
So
Wow.
we fear experience, not death. And in this way, actually, all fear of death is the fear of enlightenment, and all fear of death and the fear of enlightenment is also simultaneously the fear of life, the fear of its fullness, the fear of your freedom, the fear of not being afraid
Yeah.
to live it fully the way you want,
Wow. That's
not the
really
way
good.
which is expected from you.
Wow, man. So for me, what comes up in my mind is the
Mm-hmm.
adage of you got to die before you die, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
true freedom ensues.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that
Yes.
makes so much sense. Wow, that was really good, man. I was following you there, and I was like, that makes so much sense. We fear the experience of death, but technically there is no experience.
Experience of death.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes. Like for as long as you may think, oh, I'm dying. I'm dying. Oh, this is death. Or I'm dying. For as long as there's any thought, for as long as there's any experience at all, you're still alive.
yeah, that's crazy, man. I mean, it's
It's
like,
crazy.
yeah,
Yes.
because in a way we're already dead. Like we're
Yes. Of
already,
course.
yeah, you know what I mean? Like we're dying right now. This is the death
Yes.
process.
Yes. Yes.
But once you can recognize that, that makes life so much more beautiful.
Precisely. Precisely. Yes. You can fear pain, but you cannot fear death. So actually, the fear of death is the fear of the pain of becoming more conscious, the fear of making the unconscious pain and the discontent that controls us conscious, the fear of our own fear, the fear of the
Yeah,
experience of fear, the fear
yeah.
of our tears, the fear of our despair, the fear of our argument with death and the argument with
Ooh,
life.
that's good. That's good, man. The argument with death.
And
Wow.
which is also the argument with life.
Mm. Yeah, one and the same.
Yes, because death and life are two sides of the same coin. They cannot exist without each other.
So powerful. I never heard anybody say it like that. The fear of death is the fear of enlightenment.
Yes.
That's good stuff. It's like I've known that somewhere deep in my being, in my
Mm-hmm.
soul, but I've never heard anyone articulate that. And when she said it, I was like, oh, of course. That's so good.
Yes. Yes.
That's good, man. I also heard you say one time, once you recognize your own death, you figure out that everything is meaningless, right? And then you could get caught in a loop, a sort of attachment of everything is meaningless, right? But even the idea that everything is meaningless,
Is
you
itself.
said,
Yes.
is meaningless. I'm like,
Is
that's good.
itself meaningless.
That's
Yes.
good.
Yes. 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 Yes.
That's perfect because I feel as though a lot of us, I'm not judging, I'm just saying, maybe even I was caught at this one point. I was caught in that everything is meaningless, almost a sort of like a sort of nihilism. You know, once you
Yeah.
do recognize that
Yes.
I'm gonna lose me as, you know, Gary, I'm gonna lose everything. The idea of what my life is someday, it's gonna, one of these days, could be tomorrow, could be next week, when I'm 80, one of these days, everything I'm gonna lose. So if you dwell on that too much, you could just get caught in a sort of nihilism and see everything as meaningless. But then again, I recognize that that is meaningless, but I never heard anybody say it like you. Like, yeah, even that thought is
Yes.
meaningless. Like
Yes.
figuring out that everything is meaningless. So yeah, you just have a way with words, man.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. And it's not it, it's not even that, if you dwell on it too much, you should dwell on it as much as it takes until it completely saturates you and it's in your bones. But also the next part is also to realize that you cannot live like this, and this idea that everything is meaningless, therefore uh, there is like no point in life, let's say,
Yeah.
right, is also meaningless and stupid and empty in itself. So the point of life is pleasure, so when people get stuck in this kind of, I wouldn't call it necessarily nihilism. So nihilism is something very different. Nihilism actually, once I said, so the difference between nihilism and enlightenment can be easily overlooked. On the surface, they may appear the same, but deep down, a nihilist understands that life is meaningless because of death, but he's very bitter about it.
I see. Mm-hmm.
So an enlightened person, man or woman, also understands that life is meaningless because of death, but he's very joyful about it.
That's the good news.
So on the experiential level, it gives rise to the joy and appreciation of life.
I see.
And this appreciation actually, in the very kind of deep stage of making peace with death, of accepting death, which is actually after the I am stage, I call it I'm not stage. This joy is already there, actually, at this stage. So I wouldn't call it nihilism. So there's joy of life, along with the meaninglessness. But people who get stuck there, don't move further, they exhibit some sort of passivity about life. So it's like, if everything is meaningless, then why do anything at all?
Yeah.
Right. So you can just sit and just enjoy the passive life.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But it's not exactly the completely enlightened state. So in the completely enlightened state, is just as easy to rest as it is to be active. There's just as much joy in resting, in meditation or sleep, as it is in being active. Right. It's the only way it can be. It's a natural state. So imagine someone got, because it's a natural state of the mind, and we only depart from it by conditioning ourselves with violence and threats of violence and mistreatment and abuse, then it should be absolutely reasonable to imagine that someone at the age of 20 can have a completely enlightened mind. It's a natural state, right? So if we are to take example of some sages and masters that were realized but were extraordinarily passive in their life would be a very, very boring thing. If you're 20, or you cannot live a passive life. You will miss out on so many things.
Mm-hmm.
If you're 70 and you're like in enlightened sage or whatever, and then all you do is just sit around on your butt enjoying your own body and your own existence and saying a few words to your disciples, then sure, but what if you're 20?
Yeah, big difference.
So there's in this period of the realization, there's a sort of passivity that is to be transcended.
Yeah, because even doing nothing is doing something.
Yes. Yes. Precisely.
Yeah. So you mentioned stages. Would you be able to take us through the map of these stages?
Yes. Yeah, so I describe it in one of my answers, which is actually pinned on my core profile. What are the levels of enlightenment? So I say there are no levels of enlightenment, but there are levels of dreaming.
Okay.
And those stages, they were identified in various spiritual traditions as well, in very different terms. So in the ancient spiritual traditions section of my website, there's a question, what is the ego? And in this answer, I also sort of try to put together Buddhism and Hinduism and Zen Buddhism, and how they describe the stages of the realization and how the identity shifts happen through it. So your readers are welcome to read it. So here I will say, I will roughly describe it. The stages actually also correspond to chakras. And so the stages that I'm talking about only corresponds to the last four chakras. I mean, the first three, I don't even talk about too much. I mean, they can kind of also, there's no, in my experience, a very kind of easily identifiable shift between the lower stages or lower chakras, but between the higher stages there are quite easily identifiable shifts, which is not to say that you cannot jump back and forth or they cannot be sort of blurry, because the experience is very individual, and those stages of the realizations, even though they usually come in more or less linear fashion, because it's hard to realize some things before you realize some previous things, but they still would be more accurately described as facets of realizations rather than stages. But they do usually come in some sort of a linear fashion. Mm-hmm. So there was a long prelude. I'm sorry. So basically, the very first stage that happens is the presence of an impersonal witness. So some people would call it the witnessing stage. Some people could call it the soul. So in the dream state, you feel that you are a person in the body looking outside the body into the physical world. So then when the impersonal witness appears, and some people would call it God, and some people would call conscience, some people would call it awareness. It really doesn't matter what you call it at all. But you feel like you're still you in some way, but there's an impersonal witness which feels truer than you. Mm. And so the sayings like I am infinite stillness observing my imperfect personality or something like this, they come from this stage. So at this stage, there's usually a strong belief that the ego is needed, that you cannot survive without ego, and that this is enlightenment. Actually, at every stage, it feels like this is enlightenment, and there's nothing beyond it. And it was the same for me. So kind of the ego is very deceptive. It always doesn't want to see more of itself. It always doesn't want to disappear deeper. So it always like wants to say this is the final thing. Uh-huh. Just like in the dream state, you don't want to admit that there's something beyond it. So I think that this is what Osho called the spiritual body. So this is like the first authentic non-dual existence. So there's a presence of some witness. There's still a lot of ego. It's still identified with the emotions are oftentimes perceived as energy. So you stop like being a slave of society in such a profound way as you are when you're dreaming. There is some level of independence, but you're still a slave of your emotional energy.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so this is where people start speaking about energies. Uh-huh. A lot. People describe themselves as empaths, so feeling other people's pain. People sort of pay a lot of attention to energies. There's still a lot of resistance to negative energies and a lot of clinging to positive energies. So depending on how much spiritual work a person has done, on the level of behavior, equanimity, lack of anger, lack of spite, good willingness, this might not be different much from the dream state. But usually what happens is that the vocabulary changes.
Huh, I see.
So, so there are a lot of spiritual people at this stage who speak spiritual language, but they basically describe an ordinary person when they speak about themselves. So it's like, instead of saying "I don't like you," they would say "you have negative energy." You know,
I got you.
instead of saying "I dump you," they would say "I let you go."
Mm-hmm.
And things like that. So there is some authentic insight. There is some understanding that there is something beyond.
Yeah.
There is a presence of impersonal witness. There's usually a renaming of emotions into energies, or like some people say, emotions, energy motions. There's more acceptance of those energies for sure, but it's still quite limited. And depending on a person, from a perspective of the personality, unconditional love, equanimity, and calmness, there might not be a lot of change. Now, so some people call it witnessing stage. Now, as this progresses deeper and deeper, and there's a moment of realization that pretty much everything that you thought about yourself, everything that you thought about your character, all your psychology basically is not real and it's self-created. There's a moment of deep surrender, deep release into the unknown, so to say. So this is a moment when the ego is truly disidentified with, and this is what was described historically as Chat-Sit-Ananda, truth, consciousness, bliss. So basically, at this stage, you realize that nothing you thought of yourself is true. Ego is completely untrue. Only consciousness is true. And you literally kind of become consciousness. You become loving awareness. So the sayings like, I am always here, I am you, I am love,
I see.
They come from this stage.
Like
So this
merging.
is the I am. What?
A complete merging.
Yes. So it's not complete yet,
Okay.
but at least like the ego is abandoned entirely as something that you identified with. So there's usually a tremendous release of bliss. There's a very deep stage of equanimity. The resistance to experience becomes even lighter, and more importantly, your main identity becomes consciousness, love, being. Right. So this is I would describe it as the I am stage. So whereas the previous stage is basically just a presence of something that points you to the beyond, or some people would call the higher self. At this stage, you literally become the higher self. So whereas the previous stage is sort of continuing your life as an ego, but with a presence of impersonal witness, here you are becoming life itself. You're becoming love itself. You're becoming life itself. So from the ultimate perspective, what's going on at this stage is it's basically the appreciation of the beauty and the bliss of life. So that's not all, actually, because after the beauty, the appreciation of the beauty and the bliss and the pleasurableness of life, after becoming life itself, after appreciating the unity with life, you also have to appreciate the emptiness and finality of death. Oh. And so at this stage, at the I am stage, the identity is sort of present and rooted here. So you always hear, I am here, right now, the consciousness. But there's no consciousness in death. So the appreciation of death, not actual dying, the body lives through this process just fine. So just feed it, let it sleep, and it's going to live through the process just fine. If you don't do anything to the body, it's going to thank you for it. It's going to flower. It's going to become more healthy. It's all happening in the mind. So the appreciation of the emptiness of death is when you realize that you don't exist. So I would call the I'm not stage. So this is where people start saying that I am nothing.
Yeah.
I am eternity. I'm not here.
Mm-hmm.
So the identity moves to something which is almost impossible to describe. So some people describe it as transcendental awareness. So it's not here. It's not even here. So you're looking at death at this stage. You're looking at your final destiny. So whereas previously you were here and you were here very, very deeply, you stop being here. So it's a stage of being consumed by the void. It's the stage of being consumed by emptiness. So it's a very deep appreciation of the emptiness of life, of its meaninglessness, and of the finality of death for you. So
it's like goes from yin to yang.
Yeah. I mean, this usually comes after. I mean, it always pretty much like it comes after the I am, because it's actually more difficult. It's rarer. It's more painful. There's more fear there. Then finally you can say that there is a stage, and it's described in Tibetan Buddhism, for example, is when those things merge together, when you realize that being and non-being are one, and they cannot be separated.
Yeah.
So sometimes they described as neither being nor non-being. Sometimes it describes as neither perception nor non-perception. It was described as the birthplace of Buddhas. Also, although technically you can't even describe the I am not stage as Buddhahood, but you seriously cannot describe the I am stage as Buddhahood, because this is, I would say, like, this is the birthplace of bodhisattvas and arhats, but not Buddhas. There's usually, not usually, always, there's a lot of suffering between the I am and I'm not.
Yeah.
So you can describe it as sainthood. This is the place that Jesus Christ taught from, but there's still a lot of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So some, I don't remember who, maybe Maharaji, maybe, no. Oh, Maharaj, probably. So I don't remember who said this quote. So he said, love tells me that I'm everything. Wisdom tells me that I'm nothing. In between those two, my life flows. So he was talking about that.
Yeah, that was Nisargadatta.
Yeah, well, yes, thank you. That's him. Yes. So he was talking about this stage. So beyond I'm not, beyond I am, beyond I'm not, and I am and I'm not. I'm neither.
Yeah.
So ultimately, this just means that if you actually translate it into common language, right? You can talk about these things in very, very spiritual ways, but you can also talk about these things in very common language. You can basically say all this means is I'll be dead, but right now I'm alive. And it's in a sort of a very, very deep appreciation and integration of both is what gives rise to this I neither being nor non-being.
Yeah. Wow.
So ultimately, it's still quite esoteric, and the return to the body isn't complete yet. So ultimately, you return to the body to such a full extent that neither this beautiful, blissful identity of the ever-present consciousness in I'm not, neither this mystical, very untouchable, transcendental identity I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I meant to say I am. So neither this mystical transcendental identity in I'm not are no longer present, and the only true identity is actually your body. So you come back to your body in a very, very ordinary, common, profoundly ordinary way, and you realize yourself as the body, because all of the stages actually happen in the mind. So strictly speaking, enlightenment is a very interesting journey. It's a journey. When you begin this journey, you inhabit the mind, literally. So the thing that you think you are when you're beginning this journey only exists in the mind. It doesn't exist in reality. It doesn't mean your body doesn't exist. We love to confuse ego with the body. We think a lot of spiritual people think the ego is the body. The ego is not the body at all. But it's an identity that lives in the mind, and it thinks that it lives. It actually doesn't at all. So enlightenment is a journey from inhabiting the mind through the mind. So first the mind makes realization. There's consciousness. This thoughts that just exist in the mind. So it's a journey from the mind, through the mind, then through the heart. So through the layers of emotional suppression, through the layers of suffering, through compassion, through fear, through emotional pain, and all the self-denials, and so from the mind, through the heart, back to the body. So from my perspective, I am the body, and that's all I am.
Wow. Jeez, man, that was too good.
It makes you indistinguishable with any other living being. So like from my perspective, when I look at a squirrel or I look at any animal, I don't see them any different at all, right? So maybe like I have a slightly bigger brain, but 2 legs, 2 arms, they get cold, they get hungry, they experience pain just like me. They're alive just like me. They're gonna die just like me. So the love of enlightenment, it starts with you. It starts with yourself. Then it grows to include all people, and then it grows to include all life, all living beings. Because ultimately there is no difference.
Yeah. Wow. Which is really just love for yourself.
What?
It's really just love for yourself.
Yes. Yes. And love for yourself allows it all to happen because it's true, and it's always been true.
Yeah.
So I also often like to make this point that how to tell between an authentic realization and just some weird idea, some hallucination. They can appear to be true in meditation or in psychedelic trips. The authentic insight, it always has the flavor of, I've always known this. It's always been true. It's always been like that. Always. I was just lying to myself. I was just pretending. I was just in denial. It never has a flavor of, I went to some realm and I found something out. I went to some realm and I was told. No, it always has the flavor of, I have always known it. I just didn't want to admit it. I was just in denial.
Yeah, it's like aha.
And it's applicable to authentic to insights about the nature of existence, the sort of philosophical things that we're talking about, life, death, as much as about thousands of insights that you will have on this path about your psyche, about how you were and why you were this way. And about all the other people, like for example, that you realize that you've only been chasing very beautiful women because you were insecure and you wanted to prove something to yourself. It's also gonna have a flavor of, I've always known this. I've always suspected this. It's always been true.
Yeah.
And just like you realize that some of the people that you thought you were friends were never really, and they were just using you to boost their ego, for example. You always feel like, I've always known this. I just really didn't want to admit it. Damn. So all authentic insights, they have this flavor of remembrance. So enlightenment is a remembrance.
Yeah. That's good, man. Whew, it's like a eureka moment.
Yes.
Constant eureka.
A moment of remembering. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a path of abandoning lies, abandoning pretense, abandoning denials, abandoning deceit, and coming back to what you have always known, coming back to truth.
Going back home.
And experientially, it feels like, from the mind through the heart and back to the body. But on the level of the mind, on the level of the understanding, which you can express in words, just like I'm doing it now, it feels like every insight is a remembering.
Oh, it's a constant remembrance.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh, wow, that's good. Constant remembrance of our true nature, I guess.
Yes.
Wow, man. And that's like miraculous in that way.
It is.
It makes life
It
seem
absolutely is.
miraculous. Like this, it's a miracle. Just coming
Well,
back
life
into
is
into
miraculous. You no longer need as a miracles when you realize that life is a miracle in itself.
yeah, just by default. Wow, it's
How
good
could it
stuff.
not be a miracle? Look, there was nothing, and then you some kind of materialize from this nothingness,
Yeah,
and in it you're gonna go back. It's the absolute miracle. You cannot understand it.
yeah.
You cannot make sense of it. You can only surrender to it.
Wow, that's good, man. Yeah, that's all we can do is surrender to it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it doesn't mean in any way that science is bad. No, science works. It's a great tool of the mind. It doesn't mean that all pursuits are meaningless. I mean, some can be extraordinary satisfactory. Like I teach and help others because it gives me pleasure. Well, obviously, if I had to spend every hour of my time earning a living or scavenging for food, that's what I would be doing. It would still be a miracle. Just like every life of every animal is a miracle. But I have a lot of free time, and there's a tremendously suffering society. So I'm enjoying very much trying to help as many people as possible.
And I think you're doing a great job, man. Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't even know what to say.
Take your time. We can.
It's good
I know
stuff.
I spoke a lot. We can rest in silence for a little
Yeah,
while.
right. Just take a breath.
Yes. Yes. Just take a few minutes.
I don't want to do too much silence. We are doing a podcast here.
That's
But
true. But what's wrong with silence? Maybe some of your listeners would also benefit from a few minutes of silence.
yeah. It's a good idea. Let's all just take some deep breaths together, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Just anchor in the breath.
Breath is beautiful.
Mm-hmm. It's life.
Mm-hmm. Always here.
Oh man. Okay. I'm just gonna. I'll break out of the meditative state for a little bit. Get back into the interview.
Okay.
Where did this all start for you? Where did this all come from? If you think it's relevant, we should get into it. Some people don't think it's relevant. Maybe it's better to describe for others. Like, where would somebody start if somebody is genuinely curious about what all this hubbub is about? How would you recommend getting on the path, per se?
Yes, so I understand the people that say it's not relevant because everyone's path is very individual. It's very unique. It's very personal. In my case, I consider myself to actually be a little bit lucky because I didn't hear or study spirituality pretty much before it happened. So I was just desperate. I was going through a lot of misery, suicidal ideation. I spent half my life in depression, and like a few years, like I had a premonition that something big is coming, but I didn't start reading before enlightenment. I didn't start reading about enlightenment pretty much until 2-3 months before it happened. And I read a few books and I didn't understand a single thing. And then after 2-3 months after that, pretty much very soon after that, it happened, and I understood every book that I read. It very rarely happens this way. And my insight was very deep. It was abiding from the very start, which also means that it was excruciatingly painful and very dramatic. So like I cried every day for years. There was so much fear and so much. It very rarely happens this way. So it happened this way to, like, let's say Eckhart Tolle. It happened this way to Osho. But even very, very good, very deeply realized teachers like Adyashanti, it didn't happen this way for them. I mean, now he's a very good, clear, deeply realized teacher, but his path was long. And he also says that for most people, it's a long path. And I wouldn't say that my path was short. Like, so in the amount of suffering, in the amount of tears, resistance, emotional pain, fear, and stuff like that, it's going to be absolutely the same. So it all depends on the amount of conditioning that you carry. So a short path is not an easier path. It's a more dramatic path. It's a more intense path. It's like I was sitting on my sofa crying and being immersed in bliss for like a few years. I absolutely were not able to work. I was not able to teach. There is a famous story of Eckhart Tolle spending like 6-8 months on in homeless state on benches. So when it happens this way, it's also very dramatic and very intense. It rarely happens this way. So don't expect it to. Usually it takes years of continued practice of opening up and moreover, the shifts that I was describing previously in the interview, if you chase them, they're not going to come.
Yeah.
So an interesting thing about enlightenment is that even the deeply profound shifts of consciousness and even the state of samadhi itself, and there are various kinds of samadhis, both temporary samadhi in meditation, nirvikalpa samadhi, or an effortless samadhi, which Ramana described as sahaja samadhi. All of those are just experiences on the way to enlightenment, actually. So that's an interesting thing. So my experience is that the continued opening up to all of the emotional, energetic experience is the most important thing. And everything else, like realizations, samadhis, bliss, the experiences of oneness, the experiences of infinity, they will come as a result of that. They cannot not come. So they come as a result of continued opening up. And the less you chase them, the more likely they will come. So that's actually what separates the relatively mature teachers from relatively mature teachers. So the mature teachers, such as Osho, Adyashanti, and myself, they bring your attention back to yourself again and again and again. Yeah. Osho once said, "Never chase the divine. If you're going to chase the divine, you will always miss it. Always focus on yourself, because if you're focused on yourself, you will invariably reach the divine because there's nowhere else to go." So that's exactly my experience. So more immature teachers, they focus on enlightenment itself, on like samadhi. So the thing that they have some trick. They just need to point towards samadhi or point towards consciousness or point towards, and then the students will go, "Oh, yes." But they forget that if the student is emotionally very constipated, very immature with regards to their own, the level of acceptance of their own experience, this is just not going to happen ever, for a very simple reason, because once it happens, the intensity of emotion that comes after that will be so much compared to what they already cannot handle that they just won't let it happen. It would be too painful for it to happen. So the most important form of practice is paying attention, giving attention to every part of your experience, giving attention to the parts of the experience that you haven't been giving it before, giving direct attention. Yeah. And direct attention is very different from description. So what we used to doing and what we're conditioned to do is we used to describe our experiences in the mind and give attention to that. So we give attention to the thought that is either describing our experience, bemoaning our experience, trying to figure out the reason for our experience, or trying to plan the future in such a way that this bad experience never happens again. And this is what we give attention to, but we don't give attention to the actual experience,
Yeah.
And that's what meditation does, because meditation robs you from an opportunity to distract yourself with something, with TV, with communicating with other people. You have nowhere to go but inwards. But you can also practice it in life, right? So the question is, the most important question is how am I experiencing this present moment of being alive? And the answer isn't this is how. You're not looking for a description. How, meaning that, like, if you feel the anger, for example, how does it feel like to be angry? Let me explore that. Let me give you my attention. Is it in the chest? Where is it? How does my body feel when I'm angry? If you feel some tension, there's some tension in the body, let me explore that. Give it your attention and let it stay there, even though it's going to be uncomfortable, for as long as you want, or for as long as it takes. So the direction is the direction of opening up to experience. That's the most important thing of the spiritual path, is the opening up to experience. So you will notice, whether you're a beginning meditator or an advanced meditator, you will notice that both in meditation and life, the tendency of the mind is to think and talk about experience, think and talk about the past, about the future, and have your attention glued to that. So the most fundamental spiritual practice is ungluing this attention into the direct experience itself. Mm-hmm. And that's basically what self-realization, most people would describe enlightenment. I reserve this term for the state of the unsurpassed equanimity of the Buddha. So I say that there is a moment of realization, there is a moment of self-realization. The I am stage, when you say, the consciousness is true, everything else happens in consciousness. It's not me who is talking in the mind. No, I am conscious and I'm hearing this voice talking in me, right? So this moment, it's just how it's experienced phenomenologically, the moment when you disidentify your continually glued attention to the thought and you let it roam free. And so, like, people focus on consciousness. People say, "Oh, I found consciousness," but consciousness was always there. So what happened is that your attention was glued to the thought. It was always on thought, and now it is free to explore everything else. It is free to go into emotion as a direct experience. It is free to go into bodily tension as a direct experience. Thought no longer has this huge pull that it absolutely, like, maybe you can only, like, for a second or two focus on your breath, and then thought takes it back again, right? So this has been erased, and it's a much more fluid attention, and consciousness is just a container in which it all happens. But it's always been there. Yeah, it's always been there. It's just that you have experienced emotion, you have experienced your body, but the main focus of your attention has always been thought, and that's why. In the beginning, concentration meditation is what a lot of people recommend. And concentration meditation is actually fundamentally a very simple practice of doing just that, what I described, of ungluing the attention from thought. Because think about what's happening there. Well, let's say you just concentrate on the breath. Why breath, for example? It's very easy. The breath is always there. It goes up, it goes down. There's always some change there. It just serves as an anchor, which is easy to concentrate on. I could say concentrate on your pinky, but it's just a little bit more boring. Like you could just really focus on your pinky, or you can focus on anything else at all. but the gravitational pull of the thought would be a little harder to overcome because you used to continuous stimulation from the thought. You used to your experience. It's kind of boring to concentrate. It's difficult in the beginning, so it would be more difficult to find an anchor where nothing is going on, and it the thought would have like more pull, and you would have to notice again and again that you're thinking more. So when you concentrate on the breath, it's still difficult for most people. Thought still takes your attention back again, but it's easier. It's easier because at least there's something. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. There's some sensation there. The always changing sensation that is easier to give your attention to. But the only thing that you're practicing basically by concentrating on the breath is not being continually glued to thought.
I see. Yeah.
So once this gravitational pull of thought is broken, once you have experienced for the first time what it's like to actually allow your attention to go to other places, and experientially it may feel like a huge expansion, like an opening up. It may feel like, oh, there's consciousness. There can be like even moments of infinite space or infinite. That's just how it feels experientially, not to have your attention constantly being glued to thought. Once this is broken, the attention naturally and effortlessly starts exploring the unexplored, suppressed parts of your experience. So there could be some fear. People can start to crying. They could suddenly, you will realize there's a lot of tensions in the body. There's a lot of emotion discomfort, energies fluctuating, going through, things like that. And it all was quite hidden from your view because thought was 90% of your attention. Yeah. So for most people in the dream state, thought is 90% of their attention. Mm-hmm. And by the way, hallucinations in meditation and psychedelic trips are nothing but pictorial thought. So even if you are in a psychedelic trip or you're deep in meditation and you're seeing a lot of hallucination, there will also be some emotional experience. Like, for example, and in dreams too, like, for example, if you're seeing a hallucinatory story about someone killing you, right? There will be a lot of fear. And this fear as a direct experience is what needs your attention. That's actually why the hallucination is there. So the thought or pictorial thought, if it's hallucination, they arise together with a energetic emotion experience that you are resistant to. So it's basically, you can say that those are suppressed emotions and the stories around those emotions, the suppressed fears and the story around this fear. So a lot of people who go through this process, as they experience the suppressed fear, they can get a lot of, delusional thoughts like, oh, police is coming, someone will kill me, I feel something bad is happening right now. Well, nothing is happening. It's just the mind likes to explain the difficult experience, right? So you're hearing an explanation of a difficult experience, but a more important part of it is the experience itself. So the movement of your attention, of your awareness from the description of the experience to the experience itself, to the direct experience, is the most fundamental movement in spirituality. Mm-hmm. And it's the most fundamental movement in the beginning. It's even if you enter samadhi, it continues to be the most fundamental movement in your meditation. It continues to be the most fundamental movement in life. So, and basically, a completely enlightened mind doesn't experience a lot of emotional, energetic experience. Meditation becomes not possible, and it doesn't even hallucinate on psychedelics for precisely this reason, because all the energies, tensions, emotional suppression have been experienced and healed. The body is relaxed. The mind doesn't create emotional experience out of the blue. There is very little suppressed emotion, but the working through those layers of resistance to your own experience, resistance to yourself, is the one and only practice, basically. Mm-hmm. So the true meditation is when you don't try to anticipate any experience, and you don't reject any experience, and you give any experience your attention, but you also don't cling to it, because clinging to any experience is simultaneously rejecting something that might come afterwards. When you cling to something, you say, oh, it feels so good, I don't want it to end, because maybe something that will come next will be not as good, you know. So clinging and rejecting are two sides of the same coin. They are fundamentally the same, right? So that's the true meditation. And the concentration meditation is needed in the beginning to loosen up, to really like allow your attention to explore all aspects of what's happening in your consciousness instead of being continually glued to thought. That's its main function. And once it happened, concentration meditation is, strictly speaking, not even needed anymore. So if you meditate, and let's say in 45 minutes, 1 hour time, you feel all sorts of, different energies, or fear, or trepidation, or anxiety, or you begin to cry, or you feel some tensions in the body, and you can give it your direct attention without thoughts stealing it from you every second, then you don't even need concentration meditation. So the thought sort of becomes, at this stage, the thought becomes a background. Don't ever try to stop it. Don't ever try to stop the thought. It doesn't work. It never works. But it becomes the background of your attention instead of the foreground of your attention. And the foreground of your attention becomes the actual experience. So it's a movement from it. And in the dream state, is the opposite. Like, the foreground of your attention is the thought, and the background of your attention is the actual experience.
Interesting. That's good.
Does it make sense to you?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. And then, so eventually, life just becomes the meditation, right?
Yes. Yes. Eventually, so at some point of time, the practice becomes effortless, meaning that you don't even have to encourage your attention, your awareness to go into some uncomfortableness or unpleasantness or attention that arose. You just go there automatically. You can't even fight it. Like, there's nothing you can do about it, because awareness, consciousness, it wants to explore all of the discomfort underneath. The mind wants to integrate back from a compartmentalized state. It wants to do that. So once there's a certain amount of momentum, right, then it just becomes so automatic that whatever happens, even if there's a slight sadness, slight fears, a crunching of the stomach, like anything, it just goes to automatic. What is that? And it just goes there automatically without you having any say in it. So that's why they say that at some point of time, the practice becomes effortless, and your whole life becomes practice. Your whole life becomes meditation. Yes.
Life is the sadhana. Yeah. It's good stuff, man. Wow. Whew. I knew this was going to be a good one. I had a feeling. There's something in me. I was like, this is going to be a good talk. You're a real one. Wow.
Thank you.
This is good. I don't even know where to go from here, man.
Take your time again.
Yeah. Some more breaths, everybody. Deep breaths in and out. This is good. Yeah, so I usually ask this one to people, and I think you'll follow me on this. Would you say, we go through these different samadhi stages, these different jhanas, maybe you could say, and then you say we come back into the body, right? And there is this kind of returning, this remembering ultimately. Now, would you say once, throughout the stages, we're refining ourselves to become, as someone else would see, a more loving being? And I know they're not actually somebody else, but would you say, like, people would see you as just more of more servitude in your character, I guess you could say, a little bit more selfless, just in that effortlessness is a natural sense and a natural flow toward love?
Okay, first, love is not servitude.
That's interesting. What's the distinction between them?
Well, if I serve you, I cannot love you because I'm not your equal. If I serve you, it means that I put you above myself.
I see. I got you.
Love is not servitude. So, and also love is the most abused term in the world. Love is the most like confused thing, right? So love is not praise. Love is not servitude. Love is genuine desire for your well-being. Now the question is, you do become more loving, absolutely, and you can even say that enlightenment is dying into love. It's becoming love. It's dying into love. It's when your love to yourself grows so much that it begins to overflow you and it spills across everyone and everything. So, yes, from this perspective, yes, you can also describe love as the absence of judgment. Now, whether it is perceived as love depends on the level of confusion in another person. So if we're talking about people that understand what love is, if we're talking about people that are open to, with them, that have opened their mind, that are open to experience, that are also open to being proven wrong. You know, Adyashanti once said very aptly that enlightenment is being proven wrong again and again and again and again. By yourself most of the time, but by others too. Right? So people who are open, who have tasted love, who can see that I desire for their authentic well-being, then yes, they would perceive me as most loving. But that's not true of all people at all.
I see.
Right?
I see. Yeah.
Because love, authentic love, true love, is also very painful for the ego, and it feels dangerous for the ego because it exposes the ego, right? Like, for example, imagine someone hitting another person, right? I cannot praise them. I cannot come to them and say, "Oh, yeah, good job." You know, you like, but imagine that they are also very angry and defensive about it. And an innocent question with no judgment. If I ask them, "Why did you do that? Can you tell me?" They can find it extremely offensive. You see? So it's the matter of perception. You know, people spat Gautama in the face. Osho said also very correctly, very beautifully, that if a person isn't ready, 1,000 Buddhas will not help him. So a person needs to be ready. You know, a person needs to be ready to take responsibility for themselves, to take responsibility for their emotions.
Yeah.
And if I'm talking to an unhinged person completely out of control that blames everyone else for their emotions, that's actually what also gives rise to violence. You know, violence is fundamentally blaming other people for how you feel. You know, so you said something to me, it made me angry. I want to harm you now. So I put responsibility for how I feel, for my internal experience. So, you know, as we talked in our conversation, that the whole spiritual path is deeper and deeper acceptance of how you feel. Now I put this responsibility on you to such an extent that I will want to physically harm you, right? So tiptoeing around this person and making him feel better and basically succumbing to their narcissism isn't love, right? I can do it for a little while if I want to sort of, if I need something from them, or if I want to hook them, so to speak, to love. But sooner or later, I will have to stop doing that, and I will have to try to make this person look at himself, not necessarily their behavior as if, you know, how dare you, such a bad human being, but at a internal anguish that propels them to this behavior. I would have to help them see that this behavior doesn't serve them, that this behavior is destructive both to them and others, and the internal pain that they experience that propels them to their behavior can be handled differently. Are they going to like it? No. Because it would mean that they would have to experience more of that. They would have to get closer to it.
Yeah.
So don't expect, if you don't expect that, if you think that when you get enlightened everyone will love you, that's an egoic fantasy. And it cannot be freedom, right? Because you're still sort of fantasizing about being universally accepted. No Buddha was universally accepted. Jesus was not universally accepted. No enlightened man or woman is universally accepted. Adi also had this quote. So, well, I don't remember how it went. So I'll just say it more in my words. So you cannot have your freedom until you allow others their freedom. I think that's something like, I think he said it something like that. He's absolutely right. Right. If I'm free myself, then I don't expect you to love me. I love you, but that's my business. You may hate me and it's yours. Right. But I cannot expect you to love me. So love, just like respect, is a very interesting thing. It cannot be demanded. It can only be given. And you can give respect, you can give love. You cannot demand respect. You cannot demand love. It doesn't work this way. If it's not given freely by the other, then it's not it. Right? Like if another person doesn't give me their love freely, but I demanded it, it's not love that they're giving me. They're giving me obedience, maybe, but it's not love. Or if they're not giving me their respect freely, and I demand it, it's not the respect they're giving me. Maybe they're giving me some lip service. Sorry. Here, that's the native speaker, not native speaker.
I get it.
So they might be giving me lip service or respectful behavior, but they're not giving me the respect. Maybe they're afraid of me, but fear is not respect. So you are becoming more loving and more equanimous, but the extent to which people will see your love will depend on them. People, of course, can see calmness, but different people can interpret it very differently. Some people who are on the spiritual path and know what it's about can see unconditional love and acceptance. Some will say things like, I've noticed something interesting about you, and some could interpret it as psychopathy or sociopathy if they're very judgmental, and if they think that their passions what makes them better than everyone else. So it really depends on the individual that we're talking about. I'm sort of like a mirror. So if the individual is yearning for love, yearning for truth, yearning for acceptance, then I can be like a guiding house. But if they're not, they may outright hate me. With all, I get into sometimes I get into an extremely hateful conversation with spiritual people. After I just made one statement or one sort of statement that contradicts current spiritual view.
You get in arguments with people? I can't even imagine.
Not arguments. I mean, I would be calm, but they would be basically screaming at me and saying, I would point them to say, look at how angry you are. And they would be, yes, and Jesus was also angry when he chased away the money changers. This is righteous anger. I'm sorry, you're just horrible. You're just this spiritual bypassing and things. I was just looking at them and said, I don't think your anger is righteous at all. And they would get even more angry, So it really depends on how you view yourself, how much of the conditioning you see and you have seen. So I'm talking about right now. I gave an example of a person in this beginning witnessing stage, which didn't the transformation of their whole personality, the disappearance of their personality into love and equanimity hasn't happened yet, but the spiritual language was acquired, and has begun to be used as a tool of emotional violence confrontation, just like another language was used before, right? So ego can co-opt spirituality just like anything else. So it really depends. I was told that I'm sick. I was told that I need to see a psychiatrist. I was told that I'm a psychopath. I was told many things. People label me all the time. It's you know, usually a very honest, truthful person creates a strong reaction, but it's a sort of a uh, very much divided reaction. It's either attraction, or it's either deep attraction or it's a deep rejection.
Mm, interesting.
And Osho said once, actually, also very, very aptly, Osho was an extraordinary clear in his realization. He said, your first impulse when you meet a Buddha is to reject him because he offends you.
Hmm.
So he offends you by being he offends you by being truthful. He offends you by being honest. He offends you by his freedom. He offends you by being more relaxed than you are. He offends you by being more authentic than you are. He offends you by not caring about what you think of him, because every ego really wants other people to care. That's how we manipulate each other. We want other people to care what they think, what we think of us. So what we think of them. So we manipulate them with praise and criticism. But a Buddha is completely independent from you. So he offends you by this very fact. You see?
Yeah. Be seen as a threat. Freedom can be seen as a threat.
Of course. It is always seen as a threat. And if you're a slave that you don't want to be free, you want to make more slaves.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh no, I think the saying was like, a slave doesn't dream about freedom. He dreams about becoming a master.
That's good. Wow. Never heard that one before.
So if you neither subjugate
Damn.
nor you are impossible to subjugate, this is a very strange phenomenon for an entity that basically exists in hierarchies, that sees everyone is either above them,
Yeah.
or below them, and you're completely outside of this hierarchy.
Yeah.
It can be very confusing and disorienting, and no, it usually does not create love.
Yeah.
So
You
so
play a
I'm
different game.
yes, I'm only attracted to people who are either desperate and yearn for truth, or have sort of suffered enough to see truth in what I'm saying, to say, like, okay, well, maybe this hurts, but it sounds true. So some people who have this yearning for authenticity, have this yearning for truth. And unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, but a lot of spiritual people who pride themselves on having read a lot of stuff and being very spiritual, and have some even have some satori experiences or use psychedelics and have seen a bunch of stuff, but in their day-to-day life they aren't even there yet. So one has to have a yearning for truth.
Mm.
Because all of this, you can also say that all of these things like love, beauty, infinity, ease, equanimity, they are a consequence of truth.
Mm.
So the deepest yearning, the deepest goal of the spiritual path is truth. And by the way, this even ties to how we spoke about the practice, right? Because every uncomfortable experiences, like be it anger, fear, or something else, is true in the sense that it is there and you cannot argue with it.
Yeah.
So on a phenomenological, experiential level, this yearning for truth manifests as opening up to all of the experience that you habitually look away from, and instead look directly at it. But on the level of mind, logic, and language, it manifests itself as being receptive to statements that you intuit to be true, even if they're uncomfortable, difficult to hear. And ultimately, a truthful, honest mind is a mind that speaks truth effortlessly and without any disturbance. And as such, it cannot be disturbed itself.
Wow. Yeah. That's good. Wow. Hey man, I think we can probably wrap it up in that. That's a good line to like, bring this whole thing together. Do you have anything else you want to say other than that?
Oh yes, so I wanted to mention where I almost forgot.
Please do.
So so Gary will be posting will be kindly posting links to my work to the description of his video. So I
Yep.
wanted to say that there's a main website, truefreedom.org. On the website, there's a section community, which leads to my Discord Sangha. It's a very active Sangha. We have wonderful people there. So with different channels to express yourself, to discuss practice, to inquire deeper into truth, even to have conflict in a sort of consensual way as a tool to explore your inner emotional reaction to conflict. So there are many people there who support each other when the going gets tough and help each other go through the difficult time, as well as saying honest and comfortable things to each other. So that those are both parts of the equation. Very great community. There are actually a few people there whom I consider to be very good teachers. So I'm not even the only teacher there. So we have some other people in the similar state of mind, which can help you. I do video meetings with my Sangha every week, every Sunday at 11 a.m. PST, Pacific Standard Time. So they are broadcast. So they're broadcast live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So there's a YouTube channel. I believe Gary also has a link for that. He will be posting it. And we're using StreamYard streaming platform, so anyone could join, show up their face, and do a video conversation with me. I encourage everyone to join, and also if you post your comments to Facebook and YouTube, I see them immediately and I can respond to that. So I meet every week. I also, of course, give personal guidance. I speak to people one-on-one. I help them in a personal, kind of more discreet way as well. And finally, I wanted to mention something else. Oh yes, and I live in California, so I don't have a lot of local audience yet. I have actually just come back from a 2-day retreat that I was making with my students. We rented a big Airbnb in Granite Bay. There were about 18 people there. It was extremely productive retreat, lots of meditation, lots of emotional release. Everyone cried, which is wonderful, wonderful. Only the eyes full of tears can see the truth. That's also Osho's quote, and it's extremely true. So it was a very productive, beautiful retreat filled with tears, love, appreciation, and deeper bonding experiences. So I plan to do it more often, maybe every quarter. But most of my audience, because I write on the internet, most of my audience is scattered around the world. So for this retreat, at least half people flew. At least a couple, even transatlantic flights. So the reason I'm saying this isn't to underscore that I have very devoted students, which is true, and I'm very grateful for them for their devotion to me, which is their devotion to truth. My goal is only complete when they don't need me at all.
Mm-hmm.
But to say that I don't have a lot of local audience in California. So if you are in California, you would like to participate, to attend a retreat, or you'd like to meet me in person, or you'd like me to give a talk or a guided meditation or a Dharma talk in some center, then please reach out to me. I would be more than happy to do that. I'm pretty available. I live in Redwood City, and I have quite some time to do this work. This is the most important work that I do. But yes, that's it. That's what I wanted to mention. And thank you once again, Gary. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you for talking to me. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your questions.
Yeah, for sure. This was great. Awesome talk. Keep doing your thing. Keep on keeping on. You're fighting the good fight. I think a lot of people can and will resonate with what you have to say. I resonate at least. So yeah, keep on doing your thing. And I thank everybody that listened this long. Appreciate you as well, all you future listeners. But yeah, man, um, nothing else to say other than thank you. Peace and
Thank you,
love.
my friend. Thank you very much. Yes, peace and love to you as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Peace and love.
Bye.
Goodbye, everybody.